year, next year, yesterday, today, tomorrow, same. What makes January 1st a new year? What makes today a new day? So these were the words and questions from Venerable Chuksanim, who is the head Dharma master of the US, in his New Year's message. And he said, we must truly understand that each year is a new year, that each day is a new day. When we wake up, with what intention, what thought, with what vow do we start the day? Benedictine monk brother David Stein-Brost once described a good day. And he starts by saying, you think this is just another day in your life? It's not just another day. It's the one day that's given to you today, and it's a gift. And if you learn to respond as if it were the first day of your life and the very last day, then you'll have spent this day very well. So the me of today may feel like the me of yesterday. But Venerable Chuksanim points out, scientifically, many changes have taken place in this 24-hour period. On the cellular level, right? 330 billion cells are replaced daily. So in 80 to 100 days, 30 trillion will have been replenished. So it's equivalent of a new you. So this body is not the same as it was a year ago, and yet we can live as if nothing has changed. And Venerable Chuksanim points out that as new cells form, it duplicates the DNA, but within that process, what's most important is that our mindset also influences its formation. So what he is pointing out is that our intention influences the trajectory of our life. He uses the Korean expression, 마음을 먹다. Okay? And so that literally means 마음, which means mind, and 먹다, which means to eat. So what does that mean? It says, eat your mind. But what does this really mean? It means setting your heart to do something. You're making a firm determination. You're making up your mind. So think of it this way. You set an intention. It's kind of far away though, right? You say, oh, I'm going to do it. It's right over here. Eating your mind means really taking that intention, swallowing it, letting it digest so that it becomes your blood and your flesh. Without this firm resolve, it's very easy just to follow our habits, right? Our habitual patterns in life. The thought that I have today is just a duplication of yesterday's thoughts. My reactions today are just going to continue tomorrow, over and over again. And Chuksanim is saying, let's disrupt this monotonous chain. And how do we do that? It's through this creative effort. This creative effort can redirect our lives. It's like a spiritual rebirth. And in Won Buddhism, this creative effort is through our mind training. It allows our mind to become less stiff, right? Less rigid. So one of my favorite artists, Lauryn Hill, once said to an audience, we all have to be introduced to each other. I know that I'm up here, you came to see Lauryn Hill, but this is the first time you're meeting me. And she says, y'all never knew me. I'm just getting to know me. And anything that's not growing is dead. So we better be changing. And she said it wasn't the money that was changing her, it was God. So change is possible because it's natural. Change is possible because we all share the same spiritual hometown. So if you look in the Irwan Sangvao, what does it say? It says, Irwan is the original nature of all Buddhas, enlightened masters, ordinary humans, and sentient beings. Whether you're a Buddha or an unenlightened person, we share that original nature. So this should give us hope. In fact, Master Sotasan once said, even a villain who has committed murder, robbery, if he turns his mind around just once, may still become a Buddha or Bodhisattva. This is what it means to make up one's mind. Ma'umul. So I'm going to get you to repeat after me, okay? Let's try this. Ma'umul Mokta. Okay. So today I'm going to introduce you to a very special historical leader in Won Buddhism who you've probably never heard about, and she appears twice in our scriptures. And her name is Yi Chongchun. And to me, she's one of the greatest models of what it means to make a firm determination, not turning back, to use creative effort to pave new paths. She was born in Cheonju, Southwest Korea, in impoverished conditions. Her father passed away when she was very young, very difficult childhood, and this led her to live a life of what in Korean they call kiseng, which is a female entertainer, a courtesan. And she lived like this until her 30s, and that's when kisengs usually retire. It's when the 30s, and by this time she was 38, she felt hopeless, directionless, she just felt miserable. And one day she was at the farm, and she saw 2 pigs copulate and just had this profound awakening that just really shook off all worldly joys. And she said, our lives are also engrossed in the 5 desires. If we can't find our duty in life, how are we not different from those pigs? And in that moment, she felt like the skin of the pigs covered her whole body. This is the moment where she made up her mind. And she said to herself, I do not want to live like this anymore. This was the beginning of her spiritual search. So she started seeking, and she came across indigenous religions. But it was her uncle that introduced her to some of the female ordained devotees in Won Buddhism, and they're the ones that guided her to the community. And in 1923, she became the 32nd female disciple of Master Sotasan. And there was this very special day when Master Sotasan gave her Dharma name. And he said, your Dharma name is Yi Chongchun, which means always fresh like the spring day. So her former name was Yi Huachun, which symbolized spring, but it was the spring that bloomed but eventually faded. But this name symbolized renewal despite the changing seasons. So she would later write, thoughts of my past only bring tears to my eyes. However, to be aware of the futility of it all is a blessing that cannot have been possible without Master Sotasan. The Huachun of the past withered from the severe winter, but the Chongchun of the present will remain as Chongchun, whether in spring, summer, fall, or winter. Even the changes of the seasons, the passing of a decade or 100 years will not sway this Chongchun. So her first resolution was, I'm not going to live like this anymore. But then she made another aspiration. It wasn't for fame, it wasn't for money. She says, I want to attain Buddhahood. And she became an ordained devotee, moved to the vicinity of the Korean headquarters with her mother. So for her, her first step was that strong resolution. So in fact, when she joined, she had already land that she owned because she had accumulated a lot of wealth as a kiseng. She had land, she had money. She said, I want to give this all to you. This is my land, I want to give it to the order. And for the order, that would have been such a great thing. Why? Because they were very poor in the early years. Extreme, difficult financial hardship. However, Master Sotasan declined the offer and said, your intention, quite touching, but a person's mind may not be the same in the beginning and at the end. So think this over more carefully. And he refused the offer many more times. But she didn't have a change of heart. Finally, Master Suttesen consented and said, okay, well, in exercising virtue, exercise great virtue that is signless, like that of heaven and earth, so that your merit will remain forever unextinguished. This exchange between a teacher and a student is extremely important because it wasn't about the money. It was about what mind state are you making when you make this gesture. We may need the land, however, what's most important is whether you give, harboring no concept or sign after rendering this material beneficence. For Master Suttesen, it was, what is your mind? What is your practice? And this really moved her. So she got to work and she trained. During her years, as he said, she picked up a smoking habit, which was very prevalent during that time. So during a retreat, Master Suttesen caught her smoking. And he said, if you can't break a smoking habit, there's no point in training here. She's like, oh my God. She's like, I gotta quit. Right? But she knew this would take serious measures, so she locked herself in her room in her house that she shared with her mother, and she would only open the doors to get her meals. That was it. And eventually she quit through her own efforts. And then she would say, my time in detention helped me quit smoking. Cheonju, which is her hometown, Cheonju's I Hwachun has transformed into Won Buddhism I Cheongchun. She's so happy. So Master Suttesen, during that time, he was influenced by many of the new religious movements of that period, like Tonga. And these new religious movements taught that there was a great transformation going on. They used the expression, closing the earlier heaven, let's open a later heaven. And the earlier heaven was characterized by immaturity, by inequality, injustice. And the later heaven was characterized by cooperation, peace, rationality, justice, equality. So Suttesen was saying, we're moving to this later heaven. And in order to do that, we need a great transformation. We need a mind revolution. We need a great opening of spirit. And this is why the training was open to men, women, lay ordained, young and old. For I Cheongchun, this meant that she attended all of the retreats, summer and winter, and they were for 3 months. Wake up at 5 a.m., you practice for 2 hours, meditation, and then you do scripture study in the morning, recording your diary, and chanting in the afternoon, lecture and discussion in the evening, and this happened every day. And they rested and they ate in between. Right? But this happened every day, and then in 1929, she received first place for seated meditation. And that means you meditated at least for 2 hours for more than 25 days. So she got first place. They graded you at that time. And then in 1934, she established the first Won Buddhist temple in Cheonju, her hometown, which still exists to this day. And she bought it with her own money. Who would have thought that a courtesan would turn and transform into this Buddhist teacher? I Cheongchun's creative effort was through this Won Buddhist training. 4438. In Korean we say 사사삼팔. Do you know what that means, 4438? Who knows? It's our essential teachings. 4438. Memorize this, okay? 4-fold grace, 4 essentials, 3-fold study, 8 articles. If you go to any Won Buddhist temple in Korea, if they have a lock on their door, try that. That's probably the code. If it's not 4438, try 3844. If you receive a phone call that says 4438, most likely a Won Buddhist. So that could be your lexicon now when you see each other. So how's your 4438 going these days? 4438. But as you all know, as I know too, this practice, this great transformation, it's not easy, right? There are obstacles to this creative effort. And one of them is this mind of impatience. Like, I should be somewhere by now. But anything worthwhile takes a long time. There's no such thing as overnight success. That's a myth. So the first disciples in Won Buddhism, they were very dedicated practitioners. Like, talk about patience. Some of them were illiterate. But with the training over and over again, they started seeing changes. And one of the practices was lecturing. This is one of the items of our training in Won Buddhism, lecturing. So what happens is practitioners, you're given a topic that you contemplate over the course of the day, you connect it to your experience, and then you present what you come up with in the evening during lecturing period. So this was not only a practice about honing wisdom, but it was also helping to settle the distracted mind, because you're so focused on that topic, constantly contemplating it. In the beginning, both men and women did not want to present lecture, because you have to stand like here on this podium in front of people. That's terrifying. But they began to train. Like, everyone, there was records saying that they would rehearse, when they're in the restroom or in the kitchen or when they're cleaning, and even their sleep, they'd be rehearsing. And even during that time, that period in Korean history, women didn't speak in front of an audience. That wasn't even allowed. So can you just imagine, that's part of your training. You got to stand here. Well, some of the women were so nervous, so they'd put like a curtain, and then they'd stand behind it and give the lecture. And they were still so nervous that even after it ended, they were shaking. So Lee Chong-chun too, she had difficulty in front of an audience. So one time it was her turn to give a lecture. So she stood up and she's like, okay, now it's my turn to talk, but I'm not sure how well I'll do. And she went out and she said a few sentences, and then she's like, oh my, nothing's coming out. This is an actual record of what happened. Oh, nothing's coming out. And she's, oh no, I've ruined everything. And then she turned to Master Soita-san, and she's like, Master, nothing's coming out. And he said, come on, you can do it. And so she got encouragement, and she started to continue, but again, nothing was coming out. So she says, I'm gonna go now. And then she turned and returned to her seat. But like I mentioned, she went to all the retreats, winter, summer, right? And back to the summer and the winter. Years of training. And eventually, she was assigned to be one of those traveling lecturers. That's how eloquent and powerful of a speaker she became. So temples would invite her, and she would go and give Dharma talks. So that, this idea of, it has to be quick, baby steps are still steps. So another obstacle to creative effort sometimes is just not believing in oneself. I don't believe myself. I can't attain Buddhahood. I'm just an ordinary person. So when people tell you who they are, Maya Angelou famously advised, believe them. Just as important, however, when people try to tell you who you are, don't believe them. So when Lee Chong-chun first entered the order, do you think she was embraced by everyone? Mm-mm. In fact, when she wanted to give the land holdings, all of her land, there were people who protested. Some members protested, and they said, how can we receive money that was earned from filthy work? And this episode involving Lee Chong-chun would not be the first time that Master Soita-san encountered discord among members about who should be accepted and not. There's a well-known story in the scriptures you may have read. This is the time when Soita-san was residing in Yongsan, and a few prostitutes joined the order and occasionally visited the temple. And those around him were distraught. They said, if such people visit our pure Dharma site, then not only will outsiders laugh at us, but it will also become a hindrance for our development. We think it's best if you don't let them visit our temple anymore. And the founding master, he smiled. How can you say such petty things? The great intent of the Buddha Dharma is always to deliver all sentient beings with a spirit of great love and kindness, with great compassion. How can we let go of our original duty? Because we fear others' ridicule. What is more, in the world there may be both high and low classes, as well as high and low occupations, but in the Buddha nature, there are no such distinctions. And if you don't understand this fundamental principle, if you dislike practicing together with them when they visit the temple, then you are the people who are difficult to deliver. So he was directing them to this, the Iranzan, the one circle image. That's our object of faith, it's our standard of practice. It's the source of all things in the universe. So all things in the universe are fundamentally equal. And since all sentient beings share the same enlightened nature, or Buddha nature, they can't be differentiated from each other by any innate quality. Yi Chongchun was the custodian of her own integrity. She found inner strength. She had great faith in herself, her teacher, the teachings, and the Sangha. She regarded pain and sorrow as the source of her freedom. And that's why the Chongchun of the present remained as Chongchun in spring, summer, fall, and winter. So I'd like to honor her today because she kept her promise to the very end. She kept her promise to Master Sotaesan to exercise that great virtue that's signless, like that of heaven and earth. And that's why her merit remains unextinguished. So my question is, how do we choose to spend this moment? With what intention? How will you eat your mind? When Yi Chongchun passed, one of her Dharma friends paid tribute to her. And he said, just as a fish can transform into a dragon and ascend to the heavens, so too can an unenlightened person living in the dusty world become a bodhisattva. Thank you.
Thank you.